The starship Enterprise G hummed softly as it glided through the endless expanse of space, its sleek hull gleaming under the light of distant stars. Inside, the corridors bustled with activity as the crew prepared for their upcoming diplomatic mission to Zeta 9. Amidst this organized chaos, Mark Thompson, a charming Earthcon artist with a roguish grin and quick wit, found himself in a predicament he hadn't anticipated. Mark's heart raced as he ducked into an empty storage closet, pressing his ear against the door. The heavy footsteps of security personnel echoed down the corridor, growing fainter as they passed. He let out a sigh of relief, running a hand through his tousled brown hair. "That was too close," he muttered, glancing around the cramped space. His eyes fell on a neatly folded uniform bearing the insignia of the Interstellar Diplomatic Corps. A mischievous glint appeared in his hazel eyes as an idea began to form. Moments later, Mark emerged from the closet, now dressed in the stolen uniform, with a name tag on his chest proudly displaying the name John Smith. He straightened his collar and adopted a confident stride, nodding at passing crew members who saluted him respectfully. As he rounded a corner, he nearly collided with a flustered-looking officer. "Oh, thank the stars," the man exclaimed. "You must be the replacement ambassador John Smith. We've been looking everywhere for you." Mark's eyebrows shot up, but he quickly composed himself. "Ah, yes, that's me, Ambassador Smith, John Smith." The officer didn't seem to notice, relief washing over his features. "Excellent. I'm Lieutenant Chen. We were worried when Ambassador Johnson failed to report in. This way, sir. The captain wants to brief you on the mission." As they walked, Mark's mind raced. What had happened to the real ambassador? He'd have to find out later. For now, he needed to focus on maintaining his cover. The ship's bridge was a hive of activity. Captain Elena Rodriguez, a stern-looking woman with salt and pepper hair, turned to greet them. "Ambassador Smith, welcome aboard. I trust you've been briefed on the delicate nature of our mission to Zeta 9. Mark nodded solemnly, hoping his poker face would hold. "Of course, Captain. Rest assured I'm fully prepared to represent Earth's interests in this crucial negotiation." He silently prayed she wouldn't ask for specifics. The captain seemed satisfied. "Good. We'll be arriving at Zeta 9 in approximately 6 hours. I suggest you review the cultural briefing materials in your quarters. The Zetans are an interesting species." As Mark was escorted to his quarters, he couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. He'd pulled off some elaborate cons in his time, but impersonating an ambassador on an alien world? This was a whole new level. Once alone, Mark frantically searched the room for any information that could help him maintain his charade. He found a data pad filled with diplomatic protocols and cultural notes on Zeta 9. As he skimmed through the information, his eyes widened. Blue-skinned humanoids with a matriarchal society and a penchant for elaborate rituals. "What have I gotten myself into?" he muttered, running a hand through his hair. The next few hours were a blur of studying and rehearsing. By the time the ship entered Zeta 9's orbit, Mark felt as prepared as he could be, given the circumstances. As the diplomatic party assembled in the transporter room, Mark's palms began to sweat. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that this was just another performance. He'd charmed his way through tougher situations before. The familiar tingle of the transporter beam enveloped him, and suddenly, Mark found himself standing in an ornate hall that looked like a cross between an Art Nouveau palace and a bioluminescent forest. Tall, willowy beings with skin in various shades of blue moved gracefully around them, their iridescent robes shimmering in the soft light. And then he saw her. Queen Nea stood at the far end of the hall, and Mark's breath caught in his throat. She was tall and regal, her azure skin complemented by flowing silver hair that seemed to float around her as if she were underwater. Her eyes, a deep violet, locked onto his with an intensity that made his heart skip a beat. As the Earth delegation approached, Mark frantically searched his memory for an appropriate greeting. In a moment of panic, he blurted out, "I come in peace. Take me to your leader." He immediately cringed inwardly at the cliché. To his surprise, Queen Nea's lips curved into an amused smile. "How delightfully unconventional, Ambassador Smith. I see the humans have finally embraced a more creative approach to diplomacy." Mark, relieved by her reaction, decided to double down on his unorthodox approach. He bowed with a flourish, quoting, "I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer." He looked up at her with a roguish grin. "An ancient Earth wisdom, Your Majesty. I hope it translates well." Nea's eyes sparkled with interest. "Fascinating. Please, Ambassador, tell me more about these Earth wisdoms. I find them most intriguing." As they walked together towards the palace's inner chambers, Mark found himself improvising wildly, mixing quotes from science fiction classics with vague diplomatic platitudes. To his amazement, Queen Nea seemed to hang on his every word. "You know, Your Majesty," Mark said, warming to his role, "on Earth we have a saying, 'Do or do not. There is no try.' It's the cornerstone of our diplomatic philosophy." Nea nodded sagely. "A profound concept, Ambassador. Your people must be very wise indeed." Mark struggled to keep a straight face. "Oh, we have our moments, but I must say the beauty and sophistication of Zeta 9 far exceed our humble Earth customs." The Queen's cheeks darkened to a deeper shade of blue, and Mark realized with a start that she was blushing. "You flatter us, Ambassador Smith. Perhaps you would care to join me for a private tour of the palace gardens. We could discuss our cultures in more depth." Mark's heart raced. Was she flirting with him? He glanced at Captain Rodriguez, who gave him an approving nod. Apparently, this was a good diplomatic development. "It would be my honor, Your Majesty," Mark replied with a slight bow. As they strolled through the bioluminescent gardens, Mark found himself genuinely enchanted by both the alien beauty around him and the captivating queen at his side. Nea listened attentively as he spun tales of Earth, cleverly disguising plot points from popular sci-fi movies as historical events. "And then, if you can believe it, we had to send a team of our bravest miners into space to destroy an asteroid heading for Earth," Mark exclaimed, gesticulating wildly. Nea's eyes widened in wonder. "How thrilling! Your people are so resourceful, Ambassador. Tell me, do all Earth diplomats have such exciting lives?" Mark chuckled nervously. "Well, you know how it is. One day you're negotiating trade deals, the next you're saving the planet from an alien invasion, all in a day's work." As they talked, Mark couldn't help but notice the way Nea's hand occasionally brushed against his, or how she leaned in close when he spoke. The air between them seemed charged with an electric tension. Their tour eventually led them to a secluded alcove overlooking a shimmering lake. Nea turned to face Mark, her violet eyes intense. "Ambassador Smith," she began, her voice low and melodious, "I must confess, I find your approach to diplomacy refreshing. In fact, I believe you may be exactly what Zeta 9 needs." Mark swallowed hard, suddenly very aware of how close they were standing. "I'm flattered, Your Majesty. I'm sure we can come to a mutually beneficial agreement between our worlds." Nea's lips curved into a mysterious smile. "Oh, I have no doubt about that. In fact, I have a proposal that I believe will strengthen the bonds between Earth and Zeta 9 immeasurably." Mark's pulse quickened. This was it. The moment of truth for his diplomatic charade. "I'm all ears, Your Majesty. What did you have in mind?" Naya took a deep breath, her gaze never leaving his. "Ambassador Smith, I propose a union between our worlds. Through marriage. Specifically, a marriage between you and me." Mark's jaw dropped. Of all the possible outcomes he had imagined for this Khan, becoming engaged to an alien queen hadn't even made the list. He stared at Naya, trying to formulate a response that wouldn't blow his cover or start an interplanetary incident. "Your Majesty, I'm deeply honored," he stammered, his mind racing. "But surely there are more qualified candidates for such an important role?" Naya shook her head, her silver hair shimmering in the bioluminescent light. "No, Ambassador. Your unique perspective, your wisdom, your charm. These are precisely the qualities Zeta 9 needs in a consort. Together, we could usher in a new era of cooperation between our worlds." Mark felt trapped. If he refused, he risked offending the Queen and jeopardizing Earth's diplomatic mission. If he accepted, well, that would take his impersonation to a whole new level of complicated. Taking a deep breath, Mark made a decision. With a rakish grin that he hoped masked his inner turmoil, he took Naya's hand and brought it to his lips. "Well, Your Majesty, who am I to argue with intergalactic destiny? I accept your proposal." Naya's face lit up with joy, and she pulled Mark into an embrace that left him breathless. As he held the alien queen, feeling the warmth of her blue skin against his, Mark's mind whirled with the implications of what he'd just agreed to. He had come to Zeta 9 as a stowaway and a con artist. Now, he was engaged to its queen and poised to become a key figure in interplanetary politics. As Naya led him back towards the palace, chattering excitedly about wedding plans and diplomatic ceremonies, Mark could only think one thing. What the hell have I gotten myself into? Mark's head spun as he followed Queen Naya through the labyrinthine corridors of the Zetan Palace. The bioluminescent walls pulsed with an otherworldly glow, matching the frantic beating of his heart. He'd faced tough situations before, but getting engaged to an alien queen? This was definitely new territory. "My dear Ambassador," Naya cooed, her violet eyes twinkling with excitement, "we must begin the traditional Zetan engagement rituals immediately. Are you familiar with the rite of Qapla'?" Mark's mind raced. Qapla'? That sounded suspiciously Klingon. He cleared his throat, adopting what he hoped was a diplomatic tone. "I'm afraid Earth customs might differ slightly, Your Majesty. Perhaps you could enlighten me." Naya's face lit up. "Of course. First, we must engage in ritual combat to prove our worthiness as mates. Then, we'll recite ancient love poetry while standing on our heads. And finally, we'll seal our bond by sharing a glass of Ganik tar, our traditional beverage made from fermented swamp fungi." Mark's stomach lurched. "That sounds delightful," he managed, forcing a smile. "Though perhaps we could start with something a bit less intense. On Earth, we often begin with a simple dinner date." Naya considered this, her head tilted curiously. "A date? How fascinatingly primitive. Very well, Ambassador, we shall have this dinner date." As they entered the grand dining hall, Mark's eyes widened at the sight before him. The table was laden with dishes that looked like they'd crawled straight out of a Lovecraftian nightmare. Tentacled monstrosities wiggled on plates, while gelatinous orbs pulsated in bowls of neon liquid. Your Majesty," Mark gulped, "I don't suppose you have any simpler fare? Perhaps a nice salad?" Naya laughed, a melodious sound that sent shivers down Mark's spine. "Oh, Ambassador, your Earth humor is delightful. Come, Try the gazork larvae. They're considered quite the delicacy. As Mark gingerly picked at his writhing meal, he decided to steer the conversation toward safer ground. So, Your Majesty, tell me about Zeta-9's interplanetary relations. Any exciting trade deals in the works? Nea's eyes lit up. As a matter of fact, we've been considering expanding our reach. Perhaps you could offer some insights from Earth's experiences? Mark saw his chance. Channeling every sci-fi film he'd ever watched, he launched into an elaborate explanation. Well, on Earth, we've found great success in establishing trade routes through hyperspace lanes. Of course, we have to be wary of the spice pirates near the Outer Rim territories. To his amazement, Nea nodded enthusiastically. Fascinating. We've been considering similar strategies. Tell me, Ambassador, how does Earth handle the threat of planet-destroying space stations? Mark nearly choked on his squirming appetizer. Oh, we usually send in a small team of rebels to exploit a convenient design flaw. Works every time. As the evening progressed, Mark found himself warming to Nea's company. Despite the bizarre food and customs, there was something undeniably charming about the alien queen. Her laughter at his jokes, both intentional and unintentional, was genuine, and the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke of her people's accomplishments was captivating. Ambassador, Nea said, leaning in conspiratorially, I must admit, I find your approach to diplomacy quite stimulating. Mark felt his cheeks flush. Well, I always say, do or do not. There is no try. Nea's antennae quivered with what Mark assumed was excitement. Such wisdom. Tell me, is this another ancient Earth proverb? Oh yes, Mark nodded solemnly. Passed down for generations by our most revered diplomats. As they finished their meal, or in Mark's case, skillfully hidden most of it in his napkin, Nea stood gracefully. Come, my dear Ambassador. It's time for the next phase of our engagement ritual, the Ballad of Eternal Bonding. Mark followed her to a circular chamber where a group of blue-skinned musicians awaited. The instruments looked like a cross between Vulcan lyres and something out of Dr. Seuss's wildest dreams. Now, Nea explained, we must dance the dance of 7 veils while reciting the epic poem of Krotok and Janara, the star-crossed lovers who founded our civilization. Mark's eyes widened in panic. Your Majesty, I'm not sure I know the steps. Nea chuckled. Fear not, my love. Simply follow my lead and let the music guide you. What followed was possibly the most awkward dance in the history of 2 galaxies. Mark stumbled and flailed, his attempts at graceful movements more closely resembling a malfunctioning robot. To make matters worse, the poem he was expected to recite was in a language that sounded like a mix of Klingon and underwater gargling. As he spun and chanted, trying desperately not to trip over his own feet, Mark caught sight of himself in a reflective wall panel. His face was flushed, his hair disheveled, and there was a suspicious stain on his uniform from the writhing appetizer. Some master of deception he was turning out to be. Yet, as he looked at Nea, moving with ethereal grace and smiling at him with genuine affection, Mark felt a twinge of something unexpected. Guilt? Or was it something else entirely? The dance mercifully came to an end, and Mark found himself breathless and dizzy. Nea, on the other hand, looked as composed as ever. You dance with the passion of 1,000 suns, Ambassador, she said, her voice husky. Truly, the gods have blessed our union. Mark managed a weak smile. Thank you, Your Majesty. On Earth we have a saying, dance like nobody's watching. Though, in this case, I rather wish nobody had been. Nea laughed, a sound that was becoming increasingly endearing to Mark. Oh, Ambassador, Your modesty is charming. Come, we must prepare for tonight's grand reception. It's time to announce our engagement to the court." As they made their way to the royal chambers, Mark's mind raced. The reception would mean facing not only the Zetan court but also the Earth delegation. How long could he keep up this charade? In the privacy of a grand dressing room, attendants swarmed around them preparing elaborate ceremonial garments. Mark found himself being fitted with an outfit that seemed to be made entirely of shimmering scales and bioluminescent fibers. "I feel like a disco ball had a baby with a jellyfish," he muttered, examining his reflection. Naya, resplendent in a gown that seemed to be woven from starlight, approached him. "You look magnificent, my dear, every inch a consort of Zeta 9. As she adjusted his collar, her fingers lingered on his neck. Mark felt a jolt of electricity at her touch. Their eyes met, and for a moment the universe seemed to shrink to just the two of them. "Naya," Mark began, his voice barely above a whisper. There's something I should tell you." But before he could continue, the door burst open. A frantic attendant rushed in, bowing low. "Your Majesty, honored ambassador, forgive the interruption, but there's been an incident in the city. A group of dissidents are protesting the engagement announcement." Naya's expression hardened, her regal demeanor returning instantly. "Dissidents? Impossible. My people adore me." The attendant wrung his hands nervously. "It appears they're concerned about an outsider taking such a prominent role in our government, Your Majesty." Mark's con artist instincts kicked in. This was a chance to prove his worth and maybe, just maybe, find a way out of this increasingly complicated situation. "Your Majesty," he said, adopting his most diplomatic tone, "perhaps I could address the crowd. As Earth's ambassador, it's my duty to foster understanding between our peoples." Naya looked at him with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "That's very brave of you, Ambassador, but are you sure? Our people can be passionate in their opinions." Mark flashed his most charming grin. "Trust me, I've faced tougher crowds at Earth's intergalactic poetry slams." As they made their way to the palace balcony overlooking the city square, Mark's mind raced. He had no idea what he was going to say, but he knew he had to think fast. The fate of two worlds and his own neck depended on it. The scene that greeted them was chaos. A sea of blue-skinned Zetans filled the square, waving signs with slogans like "No Earth Scum on the Throne" and "Keep Zeta 9 Blue." The angry buzzing of the crowd rose to a fever pitch as Mark stepped forward. Taking a deep breath, he raised his hands for silence. To his surprise, the crowd quieted, their multifaceted eyes fixed on him with a mixture of curiosity and hostility. "People of Zeta 9, Mark began, his voice ringing out across the square, "I come before you not just as Earth's ambassador, but as a fellow sentient being who dreams of a united galaxy." He paused, scanning the crowd. Some looked skeptical, others intrigued. He pressed on. "I know you have concerns. Change can be scary, but let me ask you this. Do you want Zeta 9 to remain isolated, or do you want to be part of something greater? A cosmic community where ideas and cultures flow as freely as the stellar winds?" The crowd murmured. Mark could sense he had their attention. Time to bring it home. "On Earth, we have a saying, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. By joining our worlds in alliance, think of the advancements we could make together. Faster than light travel, replicator technology, maybe even time travel. The possibilities are endless." As he spoke, Mark noticed a group of hooded figures moving through the crowd, whispering to key individuals. His instincts tingled. Something was off. "But more than that," he continued, keeping one eye on the suspicious group, "this union represents hope. Hope for a future where beings from all corners of the galaxy can come together in peace and harmony, where we judge each other not by the color of our skin, be it pink, brown, or blue, but by the content of our character. The crowd was warming up now, nodding and even cheering at parts of his speech. But the hooded figures were still on the move, and Mark could sense tension building. Suddenly, one of the figures broke from the group, rushing towards the balcony with something clutched in their hand. Mark's heart raced. Was it a weapon? Without thinking, he leaped into action. In one fluid motion, he vaulted over the balcony railing, using the decorative vines covering the palace walls to slow his descent. He landed in front of the would-be assailant with a grace that surprised even himself. Now, Mark said, facing the stunned attacker, let's not do anything rash. Why don't we talk about this over a nice cup of Ganik tar? The hood fell back, revealing a young Zeton with fierce determination in his eyes. You don't understand. This union will destroy our way of life. Mark held up his hands placatingly. Look, I get it. Change is scary, but sometimes you've got to roll the dice to hit the jackpot. And trust me, Earth's got some pretty sweet tech we're willing to share. How do you feel about hoverboards? The young Zeton's resolve seemed to waver. Hoverboards? Mark grinned. Oh yeah, and that's just the beginning. Work with us and who knows, maybe we'll crack the secret to lightsabers next. A ripple of excited murmurs spread through the crowd. The tension in the air began to dissipate, replaced by a buzz of curiosity and cautious optimism. From the balcony, Naya watched the scene unfold with a mixture of awe and something that looked suspiciously like genuine affection. As the crowd's mood shifted from hostility to excitement, she stepped forward to address her people. "My dear Zetons," she began, her voice carrying a note of regal authority, "let us embrace this new chapter in our history. Together with Earth, we shall forge a future brighter than our twin suns." The crowd erupted in cheers. Mark, still standing in the square, felt a wave of relief wash over him. He'd managed to avert a crisis, and maybe, just maybe, he was starting to believe in this crazy scheme himself. As he made his way back to the palace, surrounded by now adoring Zetons, Mark caught sight of the hooded figures slipping away into the shadows. His instincts told him this wasn't over. There was more going on here than met the eye, and he was determined to get to the bottom of it. But for now, he had a reception to attend and an interplanetary engagement to celebrate. As he rejoined Naya on the balcony, her eyes shining with admiration, Mark couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, he was in over his head in the best possible way. The grand reception hall of the Zeton Palace buzzed with excitement. Dignitaries from across the planet mingled with the Earth delegation, their varied hues of blue creating a living tapestry against the bioluminescent backdrop. At the center of it all stood Mark, still adorned in his jellyfish disco ball ensemble, plastering on his most convincing diplomatic smile as he shook hands, and various other appendages, with the assembled guests. Ambassador Smith, a portly Zeton nobleman, wheezed, pumping Mark's hand enthusiastically. "Your speech was most invigorating. Tell me, is it true that on Earth you have devices that can transport matter instantly across vast distances?" Mark's mind raced. "Ah, you must be referring to our transporters. Yes, absolutely. We use them all the time. Breakfast in New York, lunch on Mars, dinner in the Andromeda Galaxy. You know how it is." The nobleman's eyes widened in awe. "Fascinating. And to think, some were worried about your influence on our culture. Clearly, we have much to learn from Earth." As the Zeton waddled away, Mark felt a familiar pang of guilt. The lies were piling up, and he was starting to lose track of which outlandish claims he'd made to whom. He scanned the room for Naya, finding her deep in conversation with a group of stern-looking advisors. Their eyes met across the crowded hall, and Naya's face lit up with a smile that made Mark's heart skip a beat. She excused herself from her group and glided towards him with otherworldly grace. "My dear ambassador," she purred, her voice sending shivers down Mark's spine, "you continue to impress me. The way you handled the crowd earlier was nothing short of miraculous." Mark felt his cheeks flush. "Oh, just doing my job. Intergalactic peace and all that." Naya leaned in close, her breath warm against his ear. "Perhaps we could continue our cultural exchange in private. I'm most eager to learn more about Earth's customs." Mark's collar suddenly felt very tight. That sounds... don't we have more official duties to attend to?" Naya's laugh was like music. "Always so dedicated to your work. Very well, we'll mingle a bit more. But don't think you're escaping me that easily, Ambassador." As Naya sashayed away, Mark let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. This was getting out of hand. The longer he kept up this charade, the harder it would be to come clean. And yet, the thought of disappointing Naya, of losing the warmth in her eyes when she looked at him, made his chest ache in a way he wasn't prepared for. Suddenly, a commotion near the entrance caught his attention. A group of Earth security personnel burst into the hall, surrounding a disheveled man in a torn uniform. Mark's blood ran cold as he recognized the newcomer, Ambassador Johnson, the real Earth diplomat. "There he is," Johnson bellowed, pointing an accusing finger at Mark. "That's the imposter." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Mark. He felt the weight of countless gazes upon him, a mix of confusion, anger, and betrayal. Naya pushed through the crowd, her expression unreadable. "Ambassador Smith," she said, her voice tight, "what is the meaning of this?" Mark's mind raced, searching for a way out, but as he looked into Naya's eyes, he knew the game was up. It was time to face the music. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice surprisingly steady, "I think it's time we had that private conversation after all." Naya nodded curtly, gesturing for her guards to escort them to a side chamber. As they left the stunned reception behind, Mark caught a glimpse of the hooded figures from earlier, watching from the shadows. Something told him their part in this drama wasn't over yet. The private chamber was dimly lit, casting eerie shadows across Naya's blue skin. She stood with her back to Mark, her posture rigid. "Explain yourself," she commanded, her voice cold. Mark took a deep breath. "My name isn't Smith. It's Thompson, Mark Thompson. I'm not an ambassador. I guess you could call me a professional liar." Naya turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Go on." And so Mark did. He told her everything, how he'd stowed away on the ship, how he'd assumed the ambassador's identity, how every grand claim about Earth had been cobbled together from science fiction. As he spoke, he waited for the anger, the betrayal, the order for his execution. But Naya just listened, her violet eyes never leaving his face. When he finished, silence filled the room. Mark braced himself for the worst. "Did you really think," Naya finally said, her voice soft, "that I didn't know?" Mark blinked in surprise. "What?" A smile tugged at the corners of Naya's mouth. "Mark Thompson, do you truly believe that the ruler of an advanced alien civilization wouldn't have ways of verifying the identity of a visiting diplomat?" But why?" Mark sputtered. "Why go along with it?" Naya stepped closer, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "At first, it was curiosity. I wanted to see how far you'd take your little charade. But then I saw how you handled yourself. Your quick thinking, your charm, the way you connected with my people. You may not be a real ambassador, Mark, but you have a gift for diplomacy that can't be taught. Mark's head spun. So, you're not angry? Naya laughed, a sound that sent warmth spreading through Mark's chest. Oh, I'm furious, but not for the reasons you might think. She closed the distance between them, her hand coming to rest on his chest. I'm furious because, despite knowing you were lying to me, despite every logical reason I had to dismiss you, I fell in love with you anyway. Mark's heart thundered in his chest. Naya, I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything, she whispered, pulling him close. Their lips met in a kiss that seemed to make the stars themselves stand still. For a moment, all the complications, all the lies, all the impending consequences faded away. There was only Mark and Naya, two beings from different worlds finding something real in a sea of deception. As they parted, breathless, reality came crashing back in. The sound of shouting could be heard from the reception hall. We still have a problem, Mark said, reluctantly pulling away. The real ambassador is out there, and I'm pretty sure those hooded figures are up to something. Naya's eyes hardened with determination. Then let's face it together. I have an idea, but I'll need you to trust me. Can you do that? Mark nodded without hesitation. Always. They re-entered the reception hall hand in hand, facing a sea of confused and angry faces. Ambassador Johnson was red-faced, shouting accusations, while the Earth delegation looked on in disbelief. Naya raised her hand and a hush fell over the crowd. People of Zeta 9, honored guests from Earth, I have an announcement to make. She squeezed Mark's hand reassuringly before continuing. It is true that Mark Thompson is not the official ambassador from Earth, but his actions since arriving on our world have demonstrated a unique talent for bridging the gap between our cultures. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Naya pressed on. Therefore, by royal decree, I am appointing Mark Thompson as Zeta 9's special advisor on Earth relations. Ambassador Johnson will, of course, retain his official position, but Mark will work alongside him to ensure our alliance flourishes. The room erupted in a mix of cheers and confused exclamations. Ambassador Johnson sputtered in disbelief, but before he could protest, a commotion broke out near the back of the hall. The hooded figures from earlier threw off their disguises, revealing themselves to be a group of rebel Zetans. Their leader, a fierce-looking female, stepped forward. "This is all a trick," she shouted. "The Earthling has bewitched our queen. We cannot allow this union to stand." Mark felt Naya tense beside him. Without thinking, he stepped forward. "People of Zeta 9, he began, his voice carrying across the now silent room. "I know I've lied to you. I'm not the person I claim to be. But everything I've said about the potential of our worlds working together, that was real." He gestured to the rebel leader. "Change is scary, I get that. But isolating yourselves from the galaxy isn't the answer. Together, we can achieve things neither of our worlds could do alone." The rebel leader hesitated, her resolve visibly wavering. Mark pressed his advantage. "How about this? I propose we form a joint committee with representatives from all factions of Zetan society and the Earth delegation. We'll work together to address your concerns and find a path forward that benefits everyone. What do you say?" For a tense moment, the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. Then slowly, the rebel leader lowered her weapon. I suppose we could give it a try." A cheer went up from the crowd. As the tension in the room dissipated, Mark felt Naya's arms wrap around him from behind. "Not bad for a professional liar," she whispered in his ear. Mark turned to face her, grinning. What can I say? I learned from the best. As the reception transformed into an impromptu celebration of newfound unity, Mark and Naya slipped away to a quiet balcony overlooking the Zetan capital. The twin moons of Zeta 9 hung low in the sky, bathing everything in an ethereal glow. "So," Mark said, leaning against the railing, "where do we go from here?" Naya smiled, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Well, Mr. Special Advisor, I believe we have a lot of work ahead of us, a whole galaxy of possibilities to explore." Mark pulled her close, marveling at how right it felt to hold her. "You know, there's an old Earth saying that seems appropriate. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship." Naya laughed, a sound that Mark knew he'd never tire of hearing. "Just friendship?" "Well," Mark said with a grin, "maybe a little more than that." As their lips met once again, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the universe itself was celebrating the unlikely union of a con man from Earth and the Queen of Zeta 9. Epilogue. Years passed, and the alliance between Earth and Zeta 9 flourished. Mark, in his role as special advisor, used his unique blend of charm, quick thinking, and pop culture knowledge to navigate the complexities of interplanetary relations. The palace halls, once austere and imposing, now echoed with the laughter of the royal children, a perfect blend of human and Zetan features, with skin in various shades of purple and a mischievous glint in their eyes that was pure Mark. As for Mark and Naya, their passion for each other only grew stronger with time. They faced challenges, of course, cultural misunderstandings, political intrigues, and the occasional invasion attempt by less friendly alien races. But through it all, they remained a team, their love a beacon of hope for two worlds united by an improbable twist of fate. And on quiet nights, when the business of running a planet was done, they would steal away to their favorite balcony. There, under the light of Zeta 9's moons, they would reminisce about the wild series of events that brought them together, marveling at how a lie had led to the truest thing either of them had ever known. As Mark liked to say, with a wink and a grin, in a universe full of possibilities, sometimes the most unlikely story turns out to be the best one of all. Well, dear viewers, you've just witnessed the greatest intergalactic love story since Han Solo and Princess Leia decided to make it official. If you're still with us and haven't been beamed up by passing UFOs or recruited into the Men in Black, congratulations. You've survived a tale that's part The Shape of Water, part Guardians of the Galaxy, and a whole lot of what if James Bond was actually just really good at BSing. Remember, folks, the next time you're tempted to fib your way into an alien royal court, make sure you've brushed up on your sci-fi trivia first. You never know when knowing the difference between a Klingon bat'leth and a Vulcan lurpa might save your skin, blue or otherwise. And if you're ever faced with an intergalactic diplomatic crisis, just remember the Thompson method. Quote some Yoda, throw in a bit of Kirk, sprinkle liberally with hoverboard promises, and voila, peace in our time. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go patent my new line of disco ball jellyfish formal wear. I have a feeling it's going to be the next big thing in cosmic fashion. May the Force be with you, live long and prosper, and remember, in space, everyone can hear you scheme.